So the release of Canon R5 and R6 has finally come and gone. And now we know all the specs and features of both cameras. So now the question is it time to go from APS-C to full frame? Let's find out. Hi, my name is Roger, and on this channel we talk about cameras, tech gear and videography. And if this is something that you are also interested in, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you like this video, the like button is right next to the subscribe button. So just click that too while you're at it. The R5 and R6, huh? I mean, wow. The specs on those cameras are just mind-blowing. Revolutionizing, some even may say. Now, on my channel, I mainly talk about videography. And that's because videography is my main interest, even though I take some photos now and then. So, as we go forward with this video, I must come with a disclaimer that I will focus upon the video specs of the cameras. Mostly anyway. Let's take a look at the revolutionizing specs of the R5. The Canon R5, it has 8K RAW. It has 4K up to 120 frames per second. It has a 45 megapixel sensor, enhanced dynamic range, reduced rolling shutter, a new witg X processor, 12 frames per second on the mechanical shutter, and 20 frames per second on the electronic shutter. It has dual memory card slots with one CF Express slot and one UHS-2 SD slot. And most important of all, the Canon R5 has IBIS, and it has IBIS with 8 stops when you pair it with an image stabilized lens. And of course it has C-Log. And you can have all of this with the low price of only $3,899 US. And in my Norwegian currency, that's 53,699 kroner. To put that in a perspective, an average monthly Norwegian income is approximately 30 to 40,000 Norwegian kroner. So to be able to buy this camera, you would have to go without food for about 45 days. But hey, you know, at least you can enjoy shooting in 8K RAW while you go hungry, right? My point being, as impressive as the specs on the camera is, it's not a camera that the normal person just can walk into the store and buy. For most people, it's too expensive for that. Well, I guess you can sell your dog or your race cat, but what are you then going to take photos of with the new advanced animal autofocus? Now, do I want this camera? Yes, of course I want this camera. I mean, who wouldn't? It's the newest camera from Canon. Can I afford it? No, I cannot. So, if anyone seeing this want to sponsor me and shipping me one, just contact me right here. I would really like to get my hands on one and make a review on it, but I'm probably not going to be able to. Since the R5 isn't an option for me right now, let's take a look at the somewhat less expensive R6, shall we? So the R6, it has 4K up to 60 frames per second. It has Full HD up to 120 frames per second. It has a 20.1 megapixel sensor. It has the same witg X processor as the R5. It has the same 12 frames per second mechanical shutter, and it has the same 20 frames per second electronic shutter. It has dual SD card slots, and it has the same IBIS as the R5. And of course, this camera also has C-Log. And all of this in the R6 comes at the cost of $2,499 US. And in Norwegian kroner, that's 32,199. So it's a bit cheaper than the R5, and I predict that the R6 is going to be the one that's going to sell the most. And why do I think that? Well, there are already rumors on some problems or negativities with the R5. And the biggest one is overheating. When shooting 8K RAW, you only have a recording time of 20 minutes, and that's at normal room temperature. And if you're filming outside directly in sunlight on a warm sunny day, you're probably not going to get that many minutes with the 8K RAW. There's even talk about that the R5 is overheating when it's shooting in 4K at 120 frames per second. And in 60 frames per second also. And with the compact build of the camera, it takes a long time for it to cool down. I mean, even Peter McKinnon mentioned the problem with the overheating in his review of the camera on his YouTube channel. And he's a Canon ambassador. And if a Canon ambassador says there is an overheating issue, that problem is probably a big issue. Canon has released statistics on how long you can record in optimized situations before the camera is overheating. And with all this, I think there is a big problem with the overheating. Now, the biggest issue I have with this, it's not that the camera overheats in 8K, because I really don't think that so many people is going to be interested in shooting 8K RAW. Not that many people nowadays have 8K monitors or TVs at home, so the possibility to watch the footage after you have shot it, it's not there. And the file size of the 8K RAW, it's going to be enormous. And the price tag on the CF Express memory card, it's also going to be enormous. So for the average person, the 8K is mostly a gimmick for now. People are even putting grain into their footages to get it to look more cinematic. So, I mean, the clarity of the 8K, you're going to see pimples, you're going to see nose hairs, you're going to see everything, every flaw that there is. Maybe it comes with the beauty mode. And if it's so, is it turned on by default? But it's not that long ago that 4K was something of the future, and now we all have that. So Canon might just be future-proofing the camera. Another interesting thing about the R5 is that you don't have the possibility to shoot in 120 frames per second in full HD. I mean, you can only shoot in 60 frames per second in full HD. What's that about? Why not just put that possibility into the camera when you know you have problems with the other formats? Now, I don't know, I guess it's just a software update, so if it's not already resolved by the launch of the camera, it probably will be resolved in a software update sometime in the future. But I have digressed. Back to my problem of the overheating. As I said, my biggest problem is not that it overheats in 8K, but that the overheating it's also relevant in 4K 60 and 4K 120 frames per second. This is the feature I think most people is excited about. Finally, we can shoot slow motion in 4K. But if the camera has overheating issues, even in this mode, I mean, how annoying wouldn't that be? I mean, if you're shooting a wedding and after 30 minutes plus, you get the red overheating warning in the corner of your screen. And I mean, you just can't say, hold on, let's wait 20-30 minutes because my camera's overheating. So what are you going to do? I mean, this camera is probably not for wedding photography or stuff like that. And when you take the 8K, because I don't think that many people is going to use it, and the 4K slow motion, those two things away from the R5, I mean, the R6 doesn't look that bad now, does it? What's interesting now is what's going to happen to Canon's first mirrorless full-frame camera, the Canon EOS R. Normally, when new products are released, the previous model drops in price. So it will be interesting to see how much you can get the R for in a few months. And soon, it's Black Friday and probably an opportunity to get the EOS R even cheaper. And when we're talking about the EOS R, just for fun, let's go into some of the specs of the EOS R and see just how much more you get with the R6. So the EOS R, it has 30.3 megapixel sensor. It has a Digic 8 image processor. It has 4K 30 and 24 frames per second, but with a significant crop. It has 1080p up to 60 frames per second and 720p up to 120 frames per second. Now it has C-Log, but unfortunately the EOS R has no IBIS. It has only digital image stabilization. And now when I go through the specs of the EOS R, that kind of reminds me of another camera. So let me read the video specs of this camera that I'm thinking about, and let's see if you know what camera I'm talking about. The camera I'm thinking about, it has 32 megapixel sensor, it has a Digic 8 image processor, it has 4K 30 and 24 frames per second, and with no additional crop to the sensor, it has 1080p up to 120 frames per second, no IBIS, only digital image stabilization, and unfortunately this camera has no C-Log. Now, do you know what camera I'm talking about? It is a Canon camera, and right now that camera is almost $950 cheaper than the EOS R. The EOS R is currently, at the recording of this video, $1,799 for the body only. And the camera I'm talking about is $849, the camera only. Now that's almost $1,000 cheaper. And when you look at these specs, you have to ask yourself, how can a camera with almost the same specs, and in one case even specs that outperforms the EOS R, now I'm talking about 120 frames per second in Full HD, and there is no additional crop in the 4K, how can a camera like that be cheaper than the EOS R? And what camera am I talking about? I'm talking about Canon's top mirrorless APS-C camera, the M6 Mark II. Now, since it is an APS-C camera, it has the limitations of a cropped sensor. Like, it's not as good in low light performances as a full frame camera, and you don't get as much dynamic range as a full frame camera. And the depth of field is also better in a full frame camera. But just because the full frame is better at these things, that doesn't mean that the M6 Mark II does a bad job at it. It's actually really good. Then you have the 1.6 crop factor that comes with the APS-C sensor. But sometimes it's not a negative thing with a crop factor. For nature and wildlife photographers, sometimes you want that extra crop to get closer to your subject. If you're looking for a telephoto camera, a cropped sensor camera is the right camera for you. Now, an APS-C size sensor in video mode are the same size as Super 35 sensors that's been used on Hollywood films for a long time. So if that sensor size is good enough for them, it's probably good enough for both me and you. Other positive things about the M6 Mark II is its size. It's a really small and compact camera, and the EF-M lenses that fits the camera is also less costly than full frame lenses, because the price of the RF lenses, it's really up there. And the cropped sensor lenses are also smaller and more compact. This makes it really easy to just grab your camera, put it in a bag, and you're on your way. The biggest negative thing about the M6 Mark II is that there is no option for C-Log in the picture profiles. But you can download flat profiles that's made for the APS-C cameras like CineStyle, and you can shoot with a flat profile. But of course, that flat profile, it's not going to be as good as the C-Log on the Canon EOS R or R5 or R6. So with all of this, is it time to switch from APS-C to full frame? Now, I really don't know. If you can afford the R5 and R6, of course, go for it. The IBIS in these cameras alone is probably worth it. But if you're in the same economical situation like me, that you like food and don't want to go hungry for a month, I think it all depends on the new price of the EOS R when the R5 and R6 hits the market. Because for me, the upgrade to full frame will be to get the EOS R, if the price of the R comes down to a reasonable level. I do want the advantages of the full frame when it comes to low light situation and better or more depth of field. But what do you think? Are you thinking of getting the R5 or R6? Or are you like me and thinking of going with the EOS R if the price drops? Let me know in the comments down below where you stand. Would love to hear from you. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. It will really help me a lot. And if you like these kind of videos and want to see more of them, hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell too to get a notification when I come out with a new video. So that's the video for this week. Thank you for watching, and maybe I will see you in another video. Bye.